Yes, people, how are we doing? Hope everyone is well. Welcome to another edition of Bacon Bashers. Now, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about a bacon whose life was ended in HMP Full Sutton in 2019. So Richard Huckle, who was branded Britain's most depraved pedophile, was brutally murdered inside of HMP Full Sutton. But before I start, I'm going to be using a couple of slang terms, what they use inside of prison, just so the word doesn't flag up on YouTube. And a slang term in prison is hairy ape, which stands for, what does it rhyme with? Hairy ape. So when I'm talking about it, I'm going to use that reference. Because as you'll have seen on some of my previous videos, when you use that term, it flags up on YouTube and you can't use the video or it will be demonetized. So that will be one of them. And bacon, people say, what is a bacon? Bacon bonce, which is Cockney rhyming slang for nonce. Bacon bonce equals nonce. So if I refer to a bacon is a nonce. So Richard Huckle was brutally murdered by Paul Fitzgerald. And Richard Huckle was serving a life with a minimum term of 25 years for his sick and depraved crimes. And when I said he was branded Britain's most depraved bacon, that's because the offences that he was committing were too graphic to go into detail on this channel. But he was actually working over in Malaysia as a Christian aid worker, and he was using that as a way of exploiting the kids over there, which, like I've mentioned, is absolutely disgusting. And this is why I'm covering and making a bit of a mockery out of his death, because in my eyes, anyone that can commit them sort of offences against kids deserve everything they get. So what I will do, I will talk about the actual murder now. Then I will go on to talk a little bit more about what he was in for, what Paul Fitzgerald was in for. But I will get down to the nitty gritty now, because I know this is the bit that you're all dying to hear, and this is the bit that you'll be wanting to see in the video. A lot of people get bored watching these videos and they don't watch the whole lot. But before I get into it, remember, hit that like button, get the algorithm up, get more people on this channel. There's not enough views. There is a lot of views on the channel, but it should be a lot higher. We need to be getting more people on. Get that algorithm up, because some of the videos don't get it. But we need to be getting more people on the channel listening to these type of stories. So Richard Huckle, Britain's most depraved bacon, was brutally murdered on the 13th of October 2019 in HMP Full Sutton by Paul Fitzgerald. So Paul Fitzgerald was 29-year-old at the time, and he went into his cell and battered him, and then he tied him up. He tied his hands, tied his feet, gagged him so he couldn't move. He then began to hairy ape him, and he said he wanted him to feel a bit of justice. This was his prison justice. Now this, like I've mentioned, I've spoke about Bacon's getting the prison justice inside of jail, but this one went to the next level. Like I just mentioned, he hairy aped him. Then he went about strangling him. He didn't actually kill him straight away. The attack went on for over 70 minutes, believe it or not, because when he went in the pad, he shut the door behind him. The screws were none the wiser. Nobody knew. Obviously, he's got him tied up, got him gagged, and he went on to insert an object inside of him as well. And he did go on to say afterwards, after the murder, that he was having too much enjoyment out of what he was doing. He then also, after the prolonged attack, after he was beating him, stabbing him, strangling him, and I think the final blow, what killed him, was he shoved an object up his nostril and into his brain, causing catastrophic injuries and obviously killing him and ending his life. But whether or not you agree with what he'd done to him, or whether you could say he deserved it, in my eyes, he deserved prison justice. Obviously, he's went a bit far by doing the other bit, but that is justice for what he's actually done. So I will talk a little bit about what he was doing. So he was over in Malaysia, and he'd been over there for a couple of years, came back, went back out there, and he actually moved out there. So it was the police officers from a task force that had been set up. 2 seconds, because I did have it all wrote down or jotted down just so I didn't get any mistakes whilst I was doing it. So it was the Australian police that tracked him down because he was on the dark web and he was on a network called the Love Zone. And they noticed that a member who always posts using the unusual greeting hires and had a distinctive freckle on one of his fingers. So the officers used social media and chat rooms to track him down, eventually finding a Facebook page that matched his profile. And then obviously he was arrested when he came back to Gatwick Airport. The police officers were waiting for him. Obviously he then went on to get bailed because they were looking into the case, and he was rearrested and charged with 91 counts, including creation and possession of them images. A hairy on a child under the age of 13. I'll not go into any more because the video will not be allowed to be played because, like I say, it's too graphic. But this absolute sicko was sharing all of this information with all the other wrong'uns, all the other bacons online. And then I'll just say a little bit because of what I've seen earlier on. When he was on, he boasted about his crimes to the other bacons, posting comments such as this: "I've hit the jackpot. A 3-year-old as loyal to me as my dog, and nobody seemed to care. And then impoverished young'uns are definitely much easier than middle class." What a sicko. This is why I'm covering this again and saying he got everything he deserved. What Paul Fitzgerald done to him was just desserts. Him being branded, or not branded, was the sickest man. He's one of the sickest in the actual entire world, not just in the UK. But Paul Fitzgerald acted out his own prison justice, and he is actually a sicko himself. He was actually serving an IPP sentence, but when he went on to commit this murder inside of prison, he was actually given a life sentence with a minimum of 2 seconds. I'm sure when I read it, it was 34 or 35 years, a minimum to serve before he's eligible for parole. Well, like I've said in another video, when I've done a video on 2 bacons in Franklin prison, people say 2 wrongs don't make a right, but in this case, 2 wrong'uns definitely made a right. One wrong'un is dead, and another wrong'un will never be getting out of prison again. He's actually now being held, as you can imagine, in a secure hospital. But he did say, leading up to this, he was actually telling the officers on the wing about his fantasies, about wanting to hairy ape somebody, wanting to kill somebody, and wanting to actually eat somebody. These were the things he was saying inside of HMP Full Sutton. It was obviously all written down. He was getting assessed at different things, and he was coming out with these statements saying what he wanted to do. But what I will do, when I've been looking up on court documents, these are the judge's sentencing remarks. Paul Fitzgerald, the jury have found you guilty of the murder of Richard Huckle, a fellow inmate in HMP Full Sutton, on the 13th of October 2019. You are a psychopath and you derive pleasure from fantasizing about hairy, aping, torturing, killing, and even eating others. The judge didn't say hairy ape, by the way. On this occasion, you derive pleasure from acting out your fantasies. You went into Mr. Huckle's cell armed with makeshift weapons, a ligature, bandages, and other items for gagging and binding Mr. Huckle. You intended to harry and kill Mr. Huckle, and if possible, cook parts of him and eat him. You did this for your own pleasure and also inflict what you called poetic justice on a convicted pedophile. You also wanted to draw attention to your mental health issues and to secure a transfer to a close supervision centre. You have revelled in the attention which you received as a result of the killing. You did not just kill Richard Huckle, you bound his arms, feet and gagged him. You harried him. I'll not say what it says, he'd done something else with the handles of a kitchen spoon, perforating his back door. You strangled him using so much force that with your hands still require treatment. You smashed his face onto the floor 6 or 7 times. You punched him. You broke his jaw. You stabbed him in the neck. You inserted a homemade weapon up his nostril so that it penetrated the bone and went over 3 inches into his brain. This went on for over an hour and a quarter, at the end of which Mr. Huckle was either dead or dying. Describing the events afterwards, you said, I got carried away by how much fun I was having doing what I was doing to him. I have to impose a sentence of life imprisonment. However, I also have to decide the minimum term for which you will serve before you are eligible to be considered for release by the parole board. It is important that you and everybody concerned with this case should understand what a minimum term means. I'm not going to go into what it means. Obviously, he's got to serve that time before he's up for parole. If and when you are released, you will still be subject to license. This will remain the case for the rest of your life. If for any reason your license to be revoked, you will be recalled to prison. The seriousness of the offence is particularly high because it involved sadistic conduct. The law says that the starting minimum point of 30 years, I have to consider whether I should adjust that figure up or down. So I have to consider all of the aggravating and mitigating factors. The aggravating factors are the significant degree of planning involved, the mental health and physical suffering inflicted on Mr. Huckle before his death, the fact that the murder involved Harry's and the spoon handle, the fact that the offence was committed inside prison, the fact that you were taking the law into your own hands, and your criminal record, which includes violent and hairy offences, although nothing approaching the seriousness of the present offence. There is only one mitigating factor, namely your mental health and specifically your psychopathy, and overlapping with that, your antisocial behaviour disorder, both of which appear to have been the product of the physical and SA which you experienced as a child. Those conditions constitute a mitigating factor insofar as they lowered your culpability. Your gender identity disorder and features of emotionally unstable personality disorder were not relevant to your offending. I will take a small reduction of the sentence which I would otherwise have imposed in the light of your mental health conditions because they were the source of the urge to kill which motivated you. But I am sure that you could have resisted that urge if you had chosen to. So just as you have resisted it for the whole of your adult life. Your claim that you were alerting prison officers to your urges in order to enlist help in resisting them does not sit well with your evidence that you did not tell the prison officers that Mr. Huckle was your intended victim, because you knew that if you did, they would stop you. I am sure that you made a conscious and deliberate decision to kill Mr. Huckle. As you yourself said, in the days after the murder, you committed murder in cold blood. I have taken account of all the aspects of your offending while seeking to impose a minimum term which is more than is just and proportionate. I have also taken into account the fact that you have not spent any time in custody on remand because you are currently serving another sentence. I have to make an order that you pay a victim surcharge. The order will be drawn up in the appropriate amount. Well, it's not going to do him any good, is it? Because he's brown bread. Paul Fitzgerald, I impose on you a sentence of life imprisonment. I fix the minimum term which you will serve in custody at 34 years. And that was off Mr. Justice Lavender on the 24th of November 2020. Actually felt like a judge dishing out them orders there. But yes, Richard Huckle found a grim death, a grim ending to the end of his life. Just desserts for what he done. Because if he didn't do them sick, depraved acts, he wouldn't be brown bread lying inside of a coffin. That, for me, is one of the probably the best prison justices or justice inside of prison you could ever hear of. That happening to somebody like that. Because like I've mentioned previously, these type of offenders can't be rehabilitated. Some sicko like that, if you let him out, he would have done it again. There would be more children at risk. Now, there'll be less children at risk because there's one more bacon not in the world. All of the bacons that have done these type of offences and done them more than once, the amount of times he's done that, don't deserve to breathe another day. And that is exactly what I think of them bacons inside of prison. The likes of Ian Huntley, Levi Belfield, all them wrong'uns all deserve the same sort of treatment. It might be a little bit of the same at the end there when he said he's got to pay a victim surcharge. What about all the victims of their offences, their SAs? But that Paul Fitzgerald, because when I did do another video on this, but I didn't do it as good as this. Obviously, I couldn't speak my mind as freely with being on life licence myself, but that's been terminated now. I can speak freely and say what I really think. But that Paul Fitzgerald, when I'd done the other video, someone had said, give the man a medal on about talking about he's a hero, sending money in and different things, but he is a wrong'un himself. Now, I've got a few bits up here, and I'll just talk a little bit about who he actually is. He got convicted of his first offence at the age of 12 when he done something similar to a 4-year-old. Then he was convicted of that offence at 13, but he was living in Northern Ireland. So following that attack, he was sent to a hostel in West Yorkshire where he was the only inmate and under constant supervision by 2 staff members. When he was left alone for seconds in the hostel's kitchen, he absconded and tried to attack a dog walker, holding a fork to her throat and threatening to stab her if she screamed. The terrified woman was able to fight him off, and when Fitzgerald was picked up by police, he was carrying the fork and a jar of Vaseline, where you can know what that wrong'un was about to do. Luckily, the woman fought back. A search of his room uncovered his journals, which he had written in a code, but the key to the code was in the same room, and the police were able to decipher his sordid fantasies. He'd written about desire to women and his other urges. Fitzgerald also declared, I love Hairy women, and vowed he would never stop reoffending. In 2009, he was convicted of offences including assault and assault with the intention to commit a hairy, and sentenced to almost 4 years with the recommendation that he should be jailed indefinitely until he no longer a danger. He done all of these same type of offences, so like I've mentioned earlier on, 2 wrong'uns definitely make a right. Because Paul Fitzgerald is a nasty piece of work himself. Obviously, he was looking at Huckle inside of prison, knowing fine well what he'd done to a lot of young minors. And he wanted to act out his own prison justice because he actually got SA'd when he was a child himself. But for someone that actually went through that as a child himself, doesn't make sense why they go on to actually do it themselves if they knew or they know what it actually feels like. But the pair of them are off the streets for good. So good riddance to the pair of them. And I'll leave that one there for now, people. But hopefully you are enjoying that content. I will be doing plenty more videos on bacon bashes. Because I've seen the comments and I've seen the subscribers saying they're loving the bacon bashing content. I will be doing loads because there is loads of stories on this. And I'm going to cover them all because we're all love hearing about a bacon getting bashed. Take care, people, and enjoy the rest of your day.